Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be talking about how to sell your coins and how to maximize their value. And I think that this is one of the most important topics that I could make a video on, and I wanted to refresh some perspectives as somebody who is a serious collector and then also kind of for fun does some dealing on the side to power that. And so I really want to break this down into what's going to be most helpful. I've helped some people who have had horror stories. There was somebody who had 3 boxes of coins. I got to help them with 2 boxes of them after the first one had gotten sold for less than $1,000 and the following 2 both sold above $100,000 each. So just as a perspective on what can go wrong if you're not careful with your coins. On the other hand, I will say this up front, I get tons of requests from people to look at their coins and they end up being worth, they can just spend them in as pocket change. And so I think that there's a huge spectrum that your coins can fall under, and it serves you right and serves the person who might have owned the coins if they were given to you by a relative or you inherited them, to have a good strategy for selling them and trying to maximize the value while maintaining the value of your time as well. Because I think that it's definitely not worth it unless you really enjoy it to spend hours and hours only to make a couple of extra dollars per hour if you don't kind of enjoy practicing that reselling, which can be really fun. And it's how I got into coins, or a big part of that. So I don't want to discount that. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So the first step is definitely to get a sense for what your coins are worth. And this topic has been a subject of many of my videos. It's been a topic that I should make more videos and updated videos around, and there's a bunch of different confusing information that potentially I've even put out because it's challenging to discern when you're not super familiar with coins and don't have that perspective to figure out, well, is my coin really super rare, or is the condition good enough where it's going to get that huge value increase? And the answer is often it's not, but sometimes it is. And so you really want to know just what's going on. And so there's different online price guides. There's the Red Book, which can be found on Amazon. I would say that the Red Book can be helpful, but it's probably not quite necessary. And a lot of these, I'm going to be talking about US coins because that's the majority of what people have. World and ancient coins are also really helpful. And for those, it's probably about looking on eBay sold prices, as well as potentially heritage auctions or great collections, auction records, and that can be helpful with your US coins. But generally, I would say that the main ways are going to be looking on these online resources like the pcgs.com/coinfacts price guide. And if you type in PCGS price guide, that'll be helpful. But there's going to be all sorts of things like what date your coin is from, what denomination, if there's a mint mark, and you can get a sense for kind of the key things to look for in each series of coins. So on the penny, there's a lot of different dates and mint marks that are really valuable. 1909S, and even with a VDB on the reverse, is going to be worth massively more than a 1909 that was struck without a mint mark, without a VDB. And so that's just one example, but quickly you kind of start realizing like, hey, this could be a massive project to try to figure out just what everything is worth here. And so I might want to go get a professional opinion. And there's a couple different professional opinions, and there's also some good and valuable opinions that aren't going to be from professionals that you can try to consult, especially from the comfort of your own home. And so that'll be a kind of key thing that I'll focus on as well. Now, if you're trying to sell a coin that you think is an error or a variety and is valuable because of that, that's going to be one category, whereas kind of a classic inherited a coin collection is going to be another, or you just have a coin that you'd like to go sell. And so the ones where you think it's going to be a super rare variety, you think it's like the 1943 penny, and we had struck those out of steel, but there were a couple copper ones that were made that were tens of thousands, if not hundreds. Those you'll probably want to quickly post online, maybe take it to a local dealer, and if it's likely that coin, they're probably going to want you to send that into a third-party grading service. That's really the route that you want to go with something that you think has a chance of being extremely valuable. I'll caution that a lot of people, I've seen people drive hundreds of miles with a bunch of coins that are really just worth spending. And so you want to be careful about how you use your time. And that's where I think posting to online forums with clear photos, think like Reddit Coins, or there's the CoinHelpU forum, or Coin Talk. There's a lot of places that you can consult collectors, and probably more often than not, the coins are not going to be the super rare version. But if they are, or if they might be, people will also definitely tell you that. And on those forums, so that can be very helpful. But if you just have kind of a classic coin collection, we're going to want to figure out, is it worth getting those coins graded? Because often it can be before going to a dealer. We'll talk about auction houses. If you take the coins to an auction house, they are likely going to go through and help you grade the coins that are going to be worth grading, and they're not going to do it in a predatory way. They're really going to try to maximize your time and your value. Within reason. They can't take every bit of care to sell a $100 coin for $2 extra, and then, I don't know, they might take 20 cents or 30 cents off of that. So that's not going to be worth it. But I think in general, trying to identify which coins might be really rare and then having those ones graded is going to establish almost a floor value where a lot of coin dealers are going to struggle to lowball you quite as much, or will at least have to contend with what the coin is and the grade that it's in before they can go ahead and make an offer. Because I think a lot of the ultimately, for most people, it is often, unless they really want to take the time to sell their coins, going to be most effective to sell it to dealers or in an efficient way to other collectors. And ultimately, you'll have to take a haircut to what the price is worth, because the people that are most likely going to be able to buy all of your coins and sell it very efficiently through their own channels simply are going to have money to make themselves. They're going to be professionals, and there's going to be a lot of considerations behind that where they can't pay up for everything, but where you're giving them something that is easier for them to sell, then that spread that they have to take, because there's going to be less effort on their part, is also going to narrow. So this next one is kind of that intermediate step. You have to decide if it's going to be worth it to sell the coins on your own. I'm impartial in this, and so there's some great reasons that you should sell it on your own, but I would generally caution that if you sell it on your own, that means posting it to eBay. Maybe you make an account and whatnot and you sign up to sell there. Maybe you're taking them to local coin shows. There's going to just be a ton of effort involved. So I alluded to that prior, but you're going to have to be responsible often for shipping all of the coins. And if they get lost, there's going to be customer service concerns. Or maybe because you're newer to selling them, there's going to be some issues where somebody says that you didn't properly describe a coin. And maybe they're being right, maybe they're being wrong. Maybe somebody tells you that the coins are fake. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. So I think a lot of that can be challenging to deal with. But as you could tell, all that effort, you're going to learn a fair amount through that process. So a lot of people just don't have the willingness and interest, and I don't fault them for it. You're not, you don't need to be interested in coins because you were given a coin collection or something like that. And so it can be a good learning experience, but on the other hand, I really think it makes sense for a lot of people to go and sell it to a coin dealer, whether that be, again, through like a consignment to an auction house, or trying to play some of the different dealers in your area and potentially online off of each other, but doing that in the most respectful way possible. That's going to maximize their time, and often that level of politeness is going to be really helpful for you as well. And so we had already discussed figuring out what your coins are worth, but I will also say there can be a big difference between, a lot of people will just have kind of investment silver or gold, and so that's like a bunch of rolls of quarters. And there can be rare quarters that can be helpful to look through, or have somebody in person or online try to discern, hey, do I have anything rare here? Obviously, to an extent, if you have 1,000 silver quarters, it's going to be worth a fair amount of money, several $1,000s, of course. And so are you going to be able to get people to look at every date or every coin to see if there's a rare variety on there? No. And so you could either do that and learn and go way deep down the rabbit hole, or accept the chance of, and it's not going to be a massive value spread, but accept the chance that you're selling something for a little less than it's worth. But on something like silver, it's good to have a sense for how much it's going to melt for. and see if you don't want to have people. There are people, if they sense, I've heard coin dealer horror stories that sense that you have no idea what everything weighs, and they're going to pay, or even you do know, but they're trying to pay 80% of the melt value. That's really not realistic. I think is 90%. 90% may not be a great offer, but that seems doable, and it also depends on what type of coin and how much quantity you're selling. If you're selling somebody $50,000 of silver, you'd like to think that they might, maybe they'll make $2,000, $2,500 on the transaction. That would be on the high end. I would know a lot of coin dealers that might do that transaction and only make $500 or $1,000. And so again, something to consider, but you don't want to have somebody taking a $10,000 spread. And that's where the next bit of advice is going to be helpful, because you want to call around a bunch of different places. And you probably don't have to go overboard and call 10 or 15 local coin stores and coin businesses, but I think that it's definitely smart to get maybe 3 to 4 if possible. If you're in a really rural area, that may be challenging, and you may have to go more with like 1 or 2 offers and then see what online reception is. And if people are like, hey, these coins that you think are errors are not worth anything, it's probably the case. I really don't think it's frequent that a coin dealer would want to, steal some kind of super high-end error, but people might do it. But again, so we have a bunch of different coin dealers, and how, you're seeing them online, what would be the next step? And I really think that would be calling around with a sense. At this point, you've hopefully done your research on the collection, with a sense for what you have, and you don't need to know it all, but to ask them when's a convenient time for you to come in, and see if you could get an appraisal. I think that it's reasonable to say that you're looking, you're probably going to take them to a couple of different dealers, but you want to be as convenient as possible for them. And I think that that's really important, because I know that a lot of coin dealers either have extremely busy schedules, or they may actually be more focused on buying coins from other dealers and not from the public. There's kind of a difference there as well. And so I've found, at least with what I've seen, that dealers will give better offers and just really appreciate it if there's able to be a scheduling component, as opposed to seeing people come in and say, you guys are open, you guys should definitely take my coins, and be ready to purchase. If most coin shops don't have tons of different buying professionals, where they may already be evaluating somebody's collection and unable to take it at that point. So it's going to save you some time, but to go around and get a couple of different valuations from the different dealers. Now, if some of those values, whether online and from dealers, are coming in, call it above $5,000 or $10,000, it might be worth it to contact an auction house, especially if your coins are individually kind of numismatically, or like the coin collecting premium is pretty high. It's different, it's the auction houses are not going to be great candidate relative. There's not going to be much difference necessarily if it's just like some gold bullion or some silver or 90% silver. But if they're going to be rare individual coins, it can be something to think about, especially if you're able to negotiate a good buyer-seller fee with the auction houses, because the auction houses are going to put up the coins, and there's going to be a lot of different dealers plus some collectors looking at that. So it'll establish a good floor, as opposed to the potential for being ripped off by a coin dealer or by coin dealers that are going to try to retail the coins themselves. On the other hand, sometimes a coin dealer can give you immediate upfront cash instead of having to wait for that payout from an auction house. And they also, if the auction house is taking ultimately 20, 25, 30%, there are some dealers that they might have a client, or they might be able to go wholesale it themselves to another dealer that might have set that floor and can pay a little bit more. But I would say most of the time that situation is, if you present as a very knowledgeable collector, that's when you can maybe work with the local coin dealers on numismatic items to get the best prices. But at that point, it's almost like, well, maybe now you can go sell it to yourself. 2 dealers at a show, taking it around and getting some offers, pricing it with gray sheet and those types of things. I would say, as you're calling around and asking people if they can look at your coins, these are coin dealers, I would definitely say that you're willing to send clear photos to them as well, because a lot of dealers will be able to offer a quick opinion on value. And again, I'm coming from perspective of most coins that people ask me to evaluate are not worth a ton. But recently I had an old friend. He sent me photos of coins. I said, look, they're worth probably retail around $270. Maybe you could retail them for a little bit more than that. I explained exactly what each of his kind of 50 coins were. And I said, I think coin shops should offer you between $180 and $200 as a floor. He then said, well, do you want to buy them? I said, sure, like I'll pay $200. I don't think it's a very good deal. But bear in mind, if I buy, I'm unlikely to go out searching for coins from the public and trying to pay, make like $50 on a transaction or something like that. I'd rather buy a large group from a dealer, maybe for 2,000 or even 20,000, and make a cut on that just from an efficiency perspective. But it was helpful for him to know that. And then when he takes that around, I said, also, you can keep it. He has a sense, okay, most of these coins are worth what they're worth because of the silver content. In that case, there were a lot of world coins. And so, there was a cut there, and that 270 included a lot of premium for, hey, if we value these world coins with $9 of silver in them at $13, that's kind of the value that we might approach. Now, a final thing to consider here, and there's probably more. I'd love to hear your questions because I think I can follow up on them in some interesting videos. But basically, you may end up selling the bulk of the collection to, figuring out what the bulk of the collection is worth, and then kind of those higher dollar items, those you might go to an auction house or sell individually to different dealers that might be willing to offer a lot for a specific interesting coin, because totally going to be the case that if you force somebody to make an offer on everything, it's going to be a little bit lower. And it's not, again, this is not like fault of the dealer. The dealer generally is not trying to rip you off, but it's challenging, to deal and sort through and process and take the time to process a lot of the bulk items. Whereas, if there's 3 or 4 coins that I or somebody needs for their inventory, they might be a lot more willing to pay you closer to market. But those few coins either are going to be highly desirable to all dealers, in which case, if it's $1,000 numismatic coin, there's probably some dealers that will offer you $900 and others $800, others $700, depending on their interest and what they're looking to do with it. But that's where if you have multiple dealers and you have, say, $10,000 coins, you could weave through and have some of them offer the most on certain coins, others offer the most on others. So hopefully that kind of nuance makes sense. But ultimately, then you get to decide what to do with the coins. I don't think you don't need to feel pressure to sell. I often recommend, especially if there's some lower value coins, that you can keep a few of them that are special, if it's something that you've inherited, to remember the person by. Also, no harm in not doing that. And then you can kind of weigh the different offers. You can ideally weigh the different offers on different parts of the coin collection, but that can be kind of challenging because you don't want to overdo it there, where you're asking people, for a list of 100 different offers on 100 different coins, unless, they seem willing to engage with that, and then, take their offers on 2 of them, say, they may not be particularly pleased with that. So there's a little bit of kind of judgment that you can do on your own end, and move from there. Again, some of those auction houses, Stacks, Heritage, David Lawrence Rare Coins, great collections. Those are all going to be good ones. If you go the route of eBaying or whatnotting yourself, that can be a great learning process. You can keep the coins. There's a lot of great dealers that you can sell to, and there's certainly some not so good ones that you're hopefully going to be able to weed out by having done proper due diligence and moving the coins around. So again, hopefully this was helpful in just giving some considerations to think about when you're selling your collection, or how to sell coins. It's a little less for people looking to be dealers, but more if you're less knowledgeable, and trying to disperse of some coins in your possession. And so hopefully there were some good things to think about. And if not, or if it wasn't clear, please ask questions. I'll be looking forward to answering them in upcoming videos. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to head on over to treasuretown.com and sign up for our email list to stay up to date on everything that's happening, whether it's auction updates, exciting new inventory drops, coin collecting news, or general informational resources. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on another one.